Welcome back to Alien Wisconsin. Sorry, we had a few problems, it was getting back from this Age of Disclosure documentary, and, there's all sorts of challenges with that. And then, of course, OBS and YouTube just did not want to play together today because there was an update. So it was a little bit challenging, but I'm glad I'm here, and I'm glad that you're still around, those of you who are still here. So I just want to get started and kind of talk about the film, The Age of Disclosure, and what worked on the film, what didn't work, what met my expectations, what I was surprised about, all of those fun things, because there was a lot of interesting stuff going on there. So let's talk about that. So the first thing that happened with Age of Disclosure that kind of surprised me was the film was quite long. The film clocked in about just a hair under 2 hours, so it was not a short film. And that is very long for a documentary, especially since we're kind of in the era of the mini doc and the shorter documentaries. But the film worked with 34 interviews, so they had a lot of things to work in there. One of the people I follow online as a filmmaker is Mark Bone, who runs the documentary film camps, and he kind of is one of the people who teaches documentary filmmaking in this day and age. One of the things he talks about that's really important to make something a documentary and not just an informational video, which, by the way, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just learning about, how candy bars are made. That's a great video, but it's not a documentary. He says you need a strong character, and the character has to want something. The character has to want something. So does Age of Disclosure have that? The answer is mostly yes, mostly yes. The main character ends up being Lou Elizondo and a little bit of Chris Mellon as well. And they both start to want letting this information out that the government has UFOs because they want this information to help humanity. Although it's not the best character arc and the best kind of like character journey because, again, going back to what I just said, there is 34 different interviews, which is a lot. So we get a lot of high quality interviews from people who are at the top of the food chain in the intelligence agencies. They have often been in charge of the CIA, or they've been in charge of NSA, or they've been advisors to the president, national security. I believe every branch of military was represented, from the Navy to the Air Force. I don't want to stick my foot in my mouth on that, but there was a lot of different representation in that regard. What we didn't really see was a lot of private contractors, but I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Would I recommend this film? That's one of the questions that I kept getting from people through the day was, do you think it's worth the $25 to buy it on Amazon? I think it is if you're into the subject. I think the film is going to be a lot to take in if you are not into the subject. There is a lot of heavy hitters that just kind of throw it all out there, one thing after the other, and it's kind of like a deluge of information. And if you haven't done the reading or you're not familiar with the topic, it might overwhelm you. It really might overwhelm you. Like, it may actually be something that you want to pause and kind of be like, okay, wait, what's going on here? But I want to talk about the 3 predictions that I made for this film. So that was the last video that I put up, was these 3 predictions for the Age of Disclosure documentary. And one of the predictions was that there would not be that it wouldn't silence critics, there wouldn't be any evidence. And this turned out when I mean evidence, like new evidence, new documents or new scientific evidence, new images. We did not see new evidence. We did see new testimony from people who have not gone on the record before, to the best of my knowledge. Or only recently have those interviews surfaced. So I would say that for the most part, we didn't see enough to silence skeptics. That's okay. That for some people, I'm thinking that might be really disappointing. But as I mentioned in my other video, we do live in the era of AI. Would you really be convinced if there was just one photo thrown into a documentary? We're talking about information that could change the trajectory of the human species. It's going to take a lot more than one photo even if the photo is real, even if it's 100% seems real, it's going to take a lot more for people to change their mind on this subject than a photo in a documentary. So instead, what the director does is he goes out there and he interviews all the people who could know and who have seen things. And he kind of builds a intellectual framework, trying to show that this is the people at the highest levels and they would know, and that is your evidence. They've literally passed every bar. They've served at the highest level of the U.S. government, and they don't really have much to gain. These people really don't. Either they're retired. Some are still sitting in Congress, or still. Marco Rubio is obviously our Secretary of State, and in the past, Marco Rubio has run for president. It wouldn't be shocking to see him run again. So something like appearing in this film could hurt him. So he has a lot to lose. He's not looking to sell, a PDF or a book or something like that. He's really putting his reputation on the line because he seems to believe in the subject. And that's really interesting to me. Speaking of Marco Rubio, they had a lot of archived footage on him, some that I wasn't even aware of. So I was kind of impressed by just the depth and the breadth of it all. One of the other things I talked about was that this would give permission for people to, this video would give permission for politicians to start talking about this subject. I think the film accomplishes this. And I predicted it would, but I was kind of surprised by two facets of it. One was I didn't really know how many people were truly being interviewed. Like the IMDb entry page didn't have everyone on there for a while. So it only had like 8 or 10 people. It was only to the last, 48 hours or so that it mentioned 34 interviews. I was like, holy moly, that's quite a lot. It's a lot more than the IMDb page. So we see that, and because there's so many people of both parties, you really start to get the idea that this is something that politicians are beginning to take more seriously. And that's very impressive. But the other thing it does is, I want to point this out because I have it on my screen right now, is that Dan Farah has turned into a bit of an activist, which kind of surprised the hell out of me, Dan Farah being the director of this film. So he starts showing this film. He gives a private screening. The New York Times is reporting this. He gives a private screening about his film just for Congress and the House of Representatives to watch the film. Part of it a bit is, of course, vanity because some of them are in the film. But more importantly, and more interestingly, I think a lot of these people watching this film in a private screening, like they don't have to worry about constituents seeing them, they actually might change their mind on some things. They may begin to take this issue more seriously, and just in the nick of time. The film also kind of has a character arc with the Chuck Schumer's bipartisan bill, the UAP Disclosure Act. They're trying to get it in, it's basically a roughly 10 pages long. They want to put it in the Defense Authorization Bill of 2026. We had heard that it was dead. And then all of a sudden, as if a darn miracle, a small window is open to get it back into the Defense Authorization Bill. So like, there's now suddenly randomly a chance to get this legislation passed. Is this going to be a Christmas miracle for us? Is such a thing possible? I mean, it's kind of really interesting if you think about it. It's a really, really interesting idea that this film might be like the Kennedy film that Oliver Stone worked on, where it helped pass the JFK Disclosure Act. And so this film, with its private audiences, may actually start to get more buy-in, congressional buy-in, which is really exciting. And showing it to Congress people is worth far more than showing it to the general audience. I think I'm starting to understand why this film doesn't have a large theatrical showing. Like, I kind of complained that this film was only showing in New York, LA, and Washington, D.C. Part of it is because the film is not really made for a general audience. It's kind of made for people who are political wonks, or people who are really into UFOs. Like, you kind of have to know a lot about politics to go in, and because the US government is kind of amazing in the number of agencies and job titles and obscure roles and who's in charge of what. You know, it doesn't sound like it, you know, Secretary of State. Secretary of State is one of the most important roles. It's not like, you know, someone who's taking notes in the back of class. So, I mean, that's like, obviously that's like a low-hanging fruit example, but I'm trying to just kind of illustrate. You really do need to know, you know, the 16 to 18 different intelligence agencies, and the difference between the CIA and the NIA, and you know, all of these, the significance of the people who are in the documentary. I think that's probably my biggest criticisms, is that Farah doesn't do a good enough job establishing who these people really are. I think he tries, and you don't want to be talking down to your audience, but on the other hand, like, I just don't know if everyone understands the importance of the figures in this film. I mean, we had two different Senate majority leads in the film, Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid, deceased. He did show up because, in many ways, you know, the modern UFO movement is kind of a descendant of Harry Reid. He famously became aware of this legacy UFO program, the legacy UFO program being one that has operated since around Roswell in the 1940s. He becomes aware of it. He's in the Gang of Eight, obviously, one of the most important people in the entire U.S. government, being the head of the majority party in the Senate. And he becomes aware of the legacy UFO program. He asks to join it, and they say, no, you are not cleared to even hear about this stuff. They don't deny it. Nope, no reason to deny it. They just say no. And it's interesting that this group had the power to do that they could turn down, you know, one of the leaders in government's ability to even review or become even aware of this program, because the Senate and the Congress, of course, control the funds to these groups. So what Harry Reid does is, of course, he starts his own little group, so which eventually becomes ATIP, and we learn about Lou Elizondo, and we learn all about this kind of like this little band of rebels who are trying to investigate the UFO program that the U.S. government has. So that was kind of an interesting thing. I've been tracking New Jersey. Oh, well, cool. It's so excited to see that you've been tracking UFOs. I'm just reading the comments in the chat. So, well, yeah, welcome to the topic. It's amazing. It has incredible depth. I think one thing so I was watching this with a group of other UFO people, people who have read, I don't know, countless books and podcasts. Two of them were speakers at UFO events. I don't want to say who they were. They're just like local, regional Wisconsin speakers. And we all said that, you know, we were aware of much of this, aware of much of the context of the film. But we also noted that it's very hard, if you're not familiar with this topic, if you've not spent the hundreds of hours of reading and podcast listening and YouTube watching, and to get it all in one place. And that's one thing the film does really well, is it kind of condenses these libraries of thought into a single film. And you might have to watch the film a couple times, if I'm being honest, because it doesn't always like give you time to breathe. So that's the one kind of interesting thing that the film does, is that it does give you a place to watch everything. I'm trying to think about what. So Dan Farah has been making the rounds. He was on CNN. And he was also on Joe Rogan today. Joe Rogan being, I mean, does Joe Rogan need any introduction at all? But Joe Rogan being one of the most important media personalities of all time, many of his episodes get 50 million, 100 million views for a podcast, which is unimaginable, unthinkable, his reach. And one thing that Dan Farah revealed, I wasn't able to watch the whole podcast because I was busy getting ready for other things and working too. But one of the interesting things that was revealed is that Dan Farah wants to continue to work on this topic. Maybe not, he didn't make it sound like he's working on a sequel, but he's going to keep working on the UFO topic. And that really makes a lot more sense because he's acting almost as an activist and not as a director. And I think this happens because when you work on a film, he worked on this film for 3 years. When you work on a film for long enough, it kind of is your baby, you know, like it kind of is your baby. It's something that you become so deeply emotionally, intellectually invested in, and the people that are in your film. Like, you really want to do right by them. I've had people that I filmed and I'm just like, gosh, I just want you to know I am trying to tell your story as well as I can tell it, as impartially and fairly as I can tell it, and I really hope you don't hate me. You know, like, it's really challenging, but you do become emotionally invested in people, and you do really want to tell their story. And so the fact that he is having these special private screenings for Congress, that he also mentioned on the Joe Rogan show, he had a special private screening of the Age of Disclosure at SpaceX. And the SpaceX people didn't act surprised. He hinted that Elon Musk, Joe Rogan asked him about this, but they both speculate that Elon Musk is aware of the UFO, the existence of non-human intelligence. And he said, how could you not be? You launch rockets into space, you know, you're going to see them or you're going to hit them. You know, there's just basically no way. Like, you know, they're a literal obstacle to you in orbit. I see I have a couple other people in chat. If you have any questions at all or want to hear more about the Age of Disclosure or anything specific about it, I would love to hear your thoughts. If you watched the film, I'd love to hear what you thought. Anything like that. If the stream is working at all, if you're interested in that kind of thing, let me see what I can do. So, I love how Amazon markets it intense, dark, and suspenseful. Well, I mean, yeah, that's true. It's like if an AI decided to name what it was like. So, I mean, overall, my basic feeling about the film is that it is a valuable resource, that it is, Dan Farah is becoming a powerful activist in this space, and it's opened up a door for the potential passage of the UAP Disclosure Act that Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid in spirit worked on. I mean, Harry Reid the relationship between Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid is always interesting and is rife with speculation, but they were friends. They were friends. And Harry Reid, of course, is dead. He passed away of cancer. And I believe what happened was that he imparted whatever he knew about UFOs and the UAP programs to Chuck Schumer. And being friends, I always imagine it being, you know, like, hey man, you got to carry this out for me. And Chuck Schumer has kind of hinted that that's what it is, but he's never really said that, you know, verbatim. I mean, that's what politicians do. They equivocate. And so it's really interesting to see that this film may be a force for good in that regard. Obviously, the goal of the film is not to prove that non-human intelligence is here. It's for Congress to actually pass legislation and really get this ball rolling in a real cohesive manner. So I think it can accomplish that, and that's not enough for some people, and I understand that. But this is a really difficult topic to work on, and whatever we can get, whatever we can push, we're just trying to push this forward so the next generation doesn't have to deal with all these obfuscations, these lies, and that they can know the truth and they can start working on the hard things. Because I'm going to tell you guys a secret. The easy thing is admitting the truth. I know, and that's really hard, but the easy thing is admitting the truth. The hard thing is going to be learning, for our humanity, learning to navigate a universe where we're not the only intelligent being. That's going to be the interesting part. That's where things get fun and exciting and challenging and scary and full of so many opportunities. And that's the world and the universe that I want humanity to reach, is where that they have taken their rightful place in the stars. So I'm really excited that this film was made, and I hope that it keeps inspiring people to keep working on this issue. As hard as it is, I know it will be worthwhile in the end. Well, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you get a chance to watch The Age of Disclosure by Dan Farah.